What's up, YouTube? Since I've done the Venom mask, I've had lots of requests to do a Carnage mask, and that is going to be the subject of today's build video. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to Donovan Powell for pointing out the missing link in the last video, and for that, he actually won a set of patterns. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the build. And while you're watching this, if you've seen the Venom movie, and if you've liked or disliked it, please feel free to comment below what you thought about it. But please keep it spoiler free. So for today's build, I'm going to be using 5mm EVA foam. And I've already taken my Carnage pattern, and I traced out one side, flipped it over, and traced the other. And if you're getting the downloadable patterns, it'll be split into sections. You can then cut out those sections, put them together, and you get the single full pattern. Now, next thing I'm going to do is take some scissors and an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to cut this out. Okay, so I have both pattern pieces cut out. Now you'll notice in here, on certain areas like the teeth for example, I didn't follow the pattern exactly. Both sides are slightly different because I don't want it to look completely the same, but I want the long teeth in the same place as the long teeth on the other one, and so on and so forth. The things that are important that you really shouldn't vary outside of is the center part where it matches up. It comes together to form one tooth in the center, and the center parts here come to form two teeth. So you can kind of get liberal with whatever you do through here. Same thing with the eyes. I cut an extra couple little wings and jagged pieces and stuff, and just did each one a little different, but stayed within, the actual general framework of it. Of course, for everything else, all these other V-cuts are exact. And the first things I'm going to glue together are going to be all these V's on this part of the mask, and the two down here, and all these up top. Once those are all glued together, I will glue together this piece, and then I will attach the center as well. Alright, I now have all the V-cuts, and the eyes, and the ear and jawline all glued in together. And it gives it some initial shape. You're going to have to heat in the rest of it. And some of the trickiest parts of this were getting this lined up correctly. You have to put the corner point into the corner here, and then press the section together. But now that I have both halves together, I'm going to go ahead and apply contact cement along these inside edges here, and glue the two sides together. And it looks okay, but it is really just kind of a knobby, squarish, unshapen mess. So to shape it, I'm going to use a heat gun. This is a relatively expensive one. And I'm also going to use an object that is round to help me heat and round out the points and knobs in the mask itself. And if you don't happen to have a canvas mannequin head styrofoam, I don't recommend because it melts under heat. But anything solid, softball sized, or around that size, a little bigger, will work just great. And before I start doing any definition or shaping on the face, I'm going to start working on the back here. You can see there's a lot of knobby, squared off areas. I'm going to start heating them and smoothing them out. And just by heating and smoothing it out, I'm already getting a lot of that knobbiness out of it. Look on this side, it's much more rounded. You look over here, and you still have that pointed edge. And over here, it's already been drastically reduced. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process gradually all around the whole entire back of it, pushing and heating and stretching until I get everything to my satisfaction. Now that I have the back of it all rounded out, as much as I am going to do for now at least, I'm going to start working on the front. And some of the things I'm going to do, for example, you see this side here where it's kind of sticking out all wonky. I'm going to heat that so it follows a curve along down towards the bottom on both sides. I'm going to pull out a slight brow area here, and I'm going to start shaping and heating the teeth I'm going to pull in some cheekbone sections over here, work out the ear. You'll notice down here at this seam, the jaw itself kind of already has a natural curve. I'm going to continue that curve and pull out a jaw and so on and so forth. Okay, so I have done most of this and I'm pretty happy with it. Rounding all this off, rounding this in. I kind of pulled out a little area for like the jaw and then pushed in on the temple. Rounded this a little bit for the teeth and pushed in here once I heated it to spread this gap open a little bit on both sides. And overall that gives it a much better look and shape thus far than what we started out with. Now before I tweak this any further, I've done nothing on the jaw yet. The jaw is still normal. A few subtle things I did was a slight curve here where the nose would be and a slight curve here for the brow. I also followed this on both sides with these pieces here on the eyes so that it matches up. That way whenever I put a plexiglass lens in, it will all line up. Next, I'm going to do the jaw and tweak this some more before I move on to sanding this. Okay, I've shaped the jaw, and I also heated this area here and pulled downwards on it, spreading it open a little bit wider this way, and I gripped on either side with each hand and stretched it this way a little bit on either side too, until I got it nice and even. And now I'm going to use my Dremel rotary tool to sand down and smooth out all of these seams where I glued it together. I have the shape that I wanted, and now that I've sanded the whole thing, I've been going over it again with the heat gun and going over the areas where I sanded just to help smooth those out and seal those in so they're not all porous as they were from all the sanding. Every time you heat the foam, it causes the pores in it to constrict and it gets much more shiny and smooth, and it's a much better surface to work with. But due to the shape of the pattern and the nature of it, every time I would sit it down, the weight of it wants to deform the shape that I have heated in it. So what I've done is I've used some super glue, and I had some scrap 3mm EVA foam laying around, and I cut strips of that and put it in the places where it kept flexing, which is up here on the corner of the mouth and up top and down below. That makes it much more rigid but still flexible, and I use super glue instead of the contact cement, which is of course what I use for all the seams, because the super glue, whenever it dries, has a nice firm bond, in the sense that it is a very stiff and rigid bond, whereas this is flexible, which is great for places where you need some flexibility or you want to heat and form and shape. But the super glue is essentially a chemical burn that fuses the pieces together and makes them quite stiff. And I have a 23-inch head, and that is what the patterns are for. And the top here, I put a couple of pieces in just so this lifts this up on my head for two reasons. One, so it aligns my vision a little bit better, but also so that it allows a little bit of space between my head and the foam itself so that some air can travel through. So before I go ahead and seal this and Plasti Dip it, I didn't actually silicone any of the seams, partly because they look pretty good as far as the sanding goes. There was one small gap in one of them, and I filled it real quick. But here I have some puffy 3D paint, and apparently there's applicators you can get that will apply this a little more precisely, but this works good enough for what I'm doing, at least at this point, which is putting on a base layer around my eyes and some texture here on the teeth themselves. And this has been drying for about an hour. It takes about 4 hours, unfortunately, for this stuff to dry. When it does shrink and flatten up quite a bit. It's already shrunk a lot from the point that I've applied it, and it will thin out and shrink a little bit more as well as it dries. So I will put on another coat. However, the idea is I'm going to Plasti Dip and seal it next, and after that I will be painting it, and then this will be going on last, the final coat over all this, and this is going to be much more in-depth and thicker and have more detail and craziness. This is just a base an idea that I had in my head that I can start with underneath the layer of Plasti Dip. So I ran into an issue after the first layer of Plasti Dip where it started to pull the seams apart, the Plasti Dip itself. Where the contact cement didn't hold, I don't know what happened. But that whole not siliconing thing that I said, I ended up having to silicone it anyways. But what I use is acrylic latex plus silicone. This is not the fast dry. This is much slower to dry. And I have this applicator tool here. It has a little brush on the end that I've never actually used for anything. But I just use this end, and I use it to apply silicone in small, flat, even areas. Such as right in here on the nose. You may notice there's a little gap, and if you don't see it now, you will whenever I start putting all this white silicone into it. And I applied a second layer of Plasti Dip just to see what it would do after I patched some of this with silicone, and apparently I did not get this part of it sealed well enough because there is still a gap there. And then the excess I'm just going to clean off and smooth out with my finger. No water needed because the gap is so small. I just use this to push some in. So yeah, you can see the gap pretty well there. And let me see, there's another spot that is reformed right here. Of course, this gap, once again, is particularly small, but I'm still going to do my best to seal it, just because it's right in the middle of the forehead, and I don't want that to stick out. If it's something in the back and it's not perfect, I don't always care so much, especially since there's going to be some slithery, veiny-like things going up the back to help obscure all that. But right here on a smoother part of the face, in particular the forehead, I really don't want that sticking out. Alright, the second coat of Plasti Dip was much more of a success, so now I'm going to take a large paintbrush and some Mod Podge, and I'm going to begin to apply this in this direction, starting from the front and working it all the way straight around the back side of the head in that same direction. Of course, the foam is already sealed, so this isn't necessarily needed to seal the foam. I just want it for texture. When this dries and the light hits it, you'll have, fine hairline texture from all the brush strokes running from the front to the back. Right, you can see here, after several layers of the Mod Podge, it has a decent texture going this direction on the mask, which helps obscure some of the seams and other imperfections. And I went and primered this all black, and next I'm going to start painting it up red. Okay, now I have some Dupli vinyl and fabric specialty coating. The particular reason I'm using this is less for the color and more for the effect of what it does. Most spray paint comes out in a lot thicker mist than this does. This has a very fine mist, almost like an airbrush. Not quite, but close. I'm going to use this to gradually spray over the whole piece from a distance of about 14-15 inches, just to begin to give it a nice fine mist and a red tone that still has some of the black from underneath showing through. Okay, so I finished painting it with the vinyl dye primer, and I focused it a little more heavily, example, through the center here, and where like the nose would theoretically be, and up through the forehead. Didn't really apply much around the eyes. You can see a lot more of the black, and it's a lot darker right in there. I wanted to have that transition. Same thing over on the jaw. You notice it's pretty thick right through here, and back in here not so much. Helps give it the illusion of depth. Highlights and lowlights, same thing in the back. I just kind of did it through the center, but left the sides darker. Falling over here, same thing, jaw highlighted, back here lowlighted. Alright, now that it's fully painted, I took some 3mm craft foam, and this is 12 inches by 18 inches. And I took a pair of scissors and just cut from 1.5 inches down at a curve, down to 5 inches, back up. And then I took my heat gun and I got this really, really hot. And first I folded it this way, kind of like an accordion, all the way across the length of it, and stopped short on either side by about 2.5 inches. And once I did that, I took it and stretched it this way to put as much of a curve into it this way as possible. You can see there's a slight concavity to it. And then I took it and just started heating individual spots and just wrinkling them and messing them up a little bit and making them look all gnarly. And what this is going to be for is this is going to be the liner for the mouth. This is going to go on the inside from here around here. Glued in the mouth here. As you can see, it still retains a lot of that wrinkled, messed up shape. I, of course, did have to trim a little off the top and a little off the bottom to get it fit, and about 3 inches off either end. And part of the other reason why I wanted it ruffled, as you can see here, there's all these open spaces in between where I hot glued it in due to the wrinkles, both on the top and the bottom. That's going to allow air to pass in and out so I can actually breathe, because I'm not putting just straight cloth lenses in this. I'm putting plastic in this. And I need to wipe this off. But anyways, I'm putting plastic in this. And the type of plastic I'm using in this one is not the same as what I used in the Venom. In the Venom, I used 1/8 inch thick acrylic plexiglass. And if you want to go that route, you can check out the Venom video if you haven't seen it, and there is a link in it to where you can get that plexiglass. But what I'm using for this is just some clear packaging plastic. And this actually came from Boba Fett Nerf Rival Blaster package. Not that it matters where you get it from. It said you can also use the acrylic plexiglass, or you can just leave it out. I am going to be putting sheer white cloth behind this, but for right now, I'm just focusing on getting this in and gluing these in. And after I get both of these in, I'm going to go back with an airbrush and take some reds and airbrush in on this piece here. Part of the reason why I didn't Plasti Dip this and put this in before painting and doing all this is because I wanted this to be matte black. I didn't want to go through and have to get red on it and do this, that, and the other thing and then go back and repaint it to make it this color. The matte black of the foam is fine enough and helps pull away from the light, whereas this is more glossy and much more shiny. And to glue in these plexiglass lenses, I'm just going to be using some super glue. Alright, now that I have both plastic lenses in, I have some Createx transparent that I made a little less transparent by mixing some regular red with it and thinned it out to the consistency of water, essentially. It's nice and thin. I'm going to start to layer that in the mouth area here. Okay, now the little bit of red I put on it looks kind of glossy now because the paint is still wet. As it dries, it will go matte, though, just like everything else. And I'm basically just highlighting the raised areas of the foam from where I folded it and creased it prior to gluing it in. Okay, so after the red, I went through with a little bit of black and just darkened up the teeth a little bit and could put a couple spots in and here and there, around there. And went back in and made sure it was nice and black in the low lighted areas, which I think made it pop a little bit more. And now I'm going to go back through with some puffy 3D paint, and I'm going to go over my original design and make it a little bigger and a little more grandiose. And to all the people who were commenting that the eyes were too big, part of the reason they were larger is this puffy paint is going to bleed over onto the actual plastic section of the eye as well, and kind of also help to fill in the gap between this and the actual plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and start applying this, starting from the top and working my way down, ending with the teeth, which I am also going to build up larger and texture. Applied the puff paint on here in a manner with which I would prefer to see it. You can, of course, decorate yours however you wish. That is, of course, entirely up to you. I'm not going to focus too much on this right now because whenever this dries, it is going to shrink to about half the height of what it is now. About 2/3 to half the height of whatever it is whenever you apply it, which is why I did the initial layer. That, and also wanted to keep, well, I had the idea for the design in my head of what I wanted to see on it. I wanted to keep that fresh and then imagine what it would look like whenever I built on it. So I'm going to give this 4 to 6 hours of dry and then come back and check it. So after 4 hours of dry time, it has not only dried up, but is also nowhere near as shiny as whenever it was wet, but it's also shrunk as well. So I did go through and add a couple little things here and there that I felt like I needed to clean up. And then also down here on the teeth, I added a third layer, just a couple lines on each teeth just to kind of make it pop a little more. And I'm going to wait for that to dry, and in the meantime, I'm going to start working out the cloth for the eyes. Okay, so I have some white paint here that I've loaded up my airbrush because I've cut out 2 pieces of sheer fabric ribbon, and I've used some toothpicks just to stick them into some scrap pieces of EVA foam that I had lying around. And now I'm going to paint them white because they're kind of pearlescent and glittery, and that it just, I don't want that for Carnage. That's funny, I stuck them to the foam so they wouldn't blow away, and they're still blowing away. Now that the white is dried, I'm going to use a small amount of some yellow in the airbrush. Alright, now that the final layers of puff paint have had plenty of time to dry, I took a napkin and some glass cleaner and cleaned the inside and outside of these. Then I took a hot glue gun with some low temperature glue sticks, and I put a bead around the inside of my lenses here, and I'm going to put a line of super glue along that, and I'm going to use that to put my lens cloth in. Alright, got the lenses in, well, the cloth in behind the lenses, I guess I should say. Once the super glue held them in place, I just went around the edge with some of the hot glue again to make sure they don't go anywhere. And now, the only thing that's left is for me to go and try this on. So the cloth wasn't quite enough to totally obscure my eyes. As you can probably notice in the footage, you can still see them. So I have already gone through and cut a few more pieces. I'm going to glue in from the inside to help obscure that for the rest of the way. But other than that, I am actually really happy with how this turned out. And I got it beside the Venom here for a size comparison. As far as the actual width of them, there's not too much difference. This is a little bit wider, but what is much wider is the back of this is much longer because you need to account for the space for me to be able to put all these rows of teeth in. Whereas in this one, it wasn't such an issue. Okay, so that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. As always, thanks for watching. And as I said before, if you enjoyed the Venom movie, or if you just like the Venom movie, I would like to hear about it, so please leave it in the comments below. And would you like to see me do a Riot symbiote mask here in the future? And if this is the first time watching, thank you for watching, and if you would, please leave a like and subscribe. It does help the channel a lot. And as always, have a great day.